I don't know which take this is anymore, but last one, my computer crashed, so I'm slowly starting to lose my sanity. Hi, my name is Yirsi, and this is my breakdown of my color-based track Neural, which is gonna come out on the 28th of May. So let's get straight into it with the intro, which consists of some pads. That's like very reverby, very kind of cold sounding, coupled with another pad that is just completely atonal. It sounds kind of creepy, and I think together it really paints this kind of cold, desolate soundscape. To kind of hammer that feeling home, I added some wind sounds. And that's already the start of the intro, at which point I start to transition it kind of by creating the storytelling that a character is walking towards a car, opening it, closing it, at which point the wind also fades out, or rather it's low passed at that point, and I add these raindrops on top of it. So it creates a feeling you're sitting in the car, together with the Foley of me like breathing and kind of simulating, like rubbing my hands together. It's like sitting down in the car, slowly warming up, slowly relaxing, at which points I start introducing some more pads that sound a bit more positive, let's say. Very colorful, very fantasy-like, that slowly rise up in volume, at which point we start to go into the transition to the verse. So just before the verse hits, we have these transitions, which I think are very important, because usually when you go from point A to point B in a track, you want to have some sort of transition, even if it's just like a symbol or end reverse symbol. In my case, I have a couple of risers, some wind chimes, just to give it more of that glitteriness that we already have with the pads, this weird kind of reverse effect, and some more symbols that just kind of ring out, just transitions, you know? Then right at the start we have the drums hitting, which are equally simple. It is just the classic dubstep kick snare pattern with a couple of ghost snares added in between to give it a little bit more groove. Then we have a shaker on top, an offbeat hi-hat, and some rides to really just hammer home that quarter note kind of rhythm. After the drums, we get to the bass layers, which consist of a low-end layer, which is a sub. That is just a sine wave with some odd harmonics added, so it's more square wave-ish. And nope, there's not even distortion. Well, there's a little bit distortion on there afterwards. A mid bass that has all the mids taken out of, and a little bit of dimension expanding and movement added on top. That's just a low pass filter that is going up and down. This sound comes from a square wave or square-ish wave with unison, with the random phase turned all the way down and the width turned all the way down. So you get this nice cool filtery type of sound. On top of that, I have another mid bass layer, which is even simpler. This is just a saw wave with the Foreman filter on it and a little bit of EQ and disperser, but nothing much going on there. Then we have the color base layers, which are these two kind of loops that I made beforehand in a sound design session, which, by the way, if you don't already do sound design sessions, I really recommend trying it, like splitting your workflow into sound design sessions and songwriting or arrangement. It really makes the workflow a lot faster, at least for me. Anyways, these two loops are what I used here. I just cut out all the low end, and I have a low pass slowly starting to fade these in. On top of that, I have some more layers that are volume automated, so the basses all have the same type of rhythm. This is just some sparkly stuff that's going on around that is probably more felt than heard. Then on top of that, we have some chord layers, some sawblocks, coupled with some random other high chords. This one, for example, is a sound font, an old sound font that I used. I like to use those a lot, usually, as layers. Then we have some more sustained layers, a Labs soft piano, which I like to use a lot, again, with some crystallizer to give it a bit more space, a bit more sparkliness, and an organ that's just kind of playing in the background. We have some ear candy layers, just this kind of well, ARP that's going on in the background. It's very quiet. This kind of weird vocal layer that I sampled from some Hungarian choir. You can't really hear this a lot, but I left it in since it was kind of the start of this whole track. But I think it adds a little bit in the background. We have this kind of glittery, kind of glassy sounding stuff that are some bell type sounds that I made with the Spectral Resonator in Ableton, which I will do a tutorial on in the future. So then we have these, which are probably the most important part of the verse in a songwriting sense. With this cello and violin that play this relatively simple melody. But this melody is like all over the track. Like we have it later here somewhere in the drop or at the end of the drop. Just kind of a leitmotif that's repeating. Then on top of that, we have some more transition layers all over the place in the verse every time. Every like eight bars. I have one of these things going on. Then a random tonal riser here and there, just more stuff to give it more movement. And we start to arrive at the vocals, which are sung by me and consist of very reverb-drenched vocals, by the way, which consist of a main vocal, just kind of sitting in the center, very compressed. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but most of the stuff isn't really important. You just need to know compression, a little bit of EQing, auto-tune, that's on there. Then we got some more vocals that double those and are hard panned. And we got this vocoder. Just more vocal layers. These aren't even perfect sounding, but since they're kind of in the background, you can't hear the little imperfections that are going on. It's fading away. Also this little call and response ad-lib that I added in here. That was the verse for the most part. Let's now hop over to the build, which starts with this little snare fill that immediately kind of transitions into this snare roll that's slowly being low passed in and then just builds up more and more energy. On top of that, I have a kick layer and a clap layer that also just get faster the more we get towards the drop. But there's a little pause right before the drop hits, just to take down the energy level again and throw it right back up when the drop hits. That makes the drop hit a little bit harder. If I were to just have this layer going on all the way till the drop hits, and then immediately have the drop hit, it has a lot less impact than if I were to give it a pause and then have the drop hit. On top of that, we have the same shaker, the same sub and mid bass, but I'm slowly automating the volume out of the sub. Again, taking down the energy so you can bring it back once the drop hits. The same chords, also same thing here. There's probably just a bunch of automation going on. For example, I have this saw plug automated, so it slowly starts to get rid of the low pass, slowly opens up. And of course, I have a lot of transitional layers. There is 2 risers, one kind of detuned saw riser, just white noise that's slowly going up. And then a couple of different risers, some tonal riser I made, some weird riser I made. Just a couple of sound design stuff going on. And here this little water sample, kind of bringing back the idea of the ocean that we had in the intro. It's always good to kind of keep consistent ideas all over the track. So then we have some automation on the master where I'm taking down the volume of the master. Again, same thing, lower the energy, bring it back when the drop hits. Same with the width. Make it a little bit more narrow, and then when the drop hits, everything opens up and you have this sea of sound, so to say. Which brings me to this one vocal layer that is basically my pre-drop vocal. That just gets faded out and drenched out in a lot of reverb towards the end of the sample. just to go into the drop and have that be part of a transition. Also, I have a frequency shifter on the vocal, on the main vocal itself. So it slowly transitions the vocal into a sort of riser, which is a technique I like to do a lot. That brings me to the most important part of the track, which, of course, it's a color-based track, is the drop, which sounds like this. So after the pre-drop vocal hits, we immediately go into the drop. We have this kick and snare here. Very simple, nothing fancy going on there. Just very snappy samples. I layered the snare with a clap, or rather 2 claps. One that's more Foley-ish, and one that sounds more like a lot of people clapping together. Then we have the same ride from the verse, just really hammering on that quarter note beat. We have the same low end basses that we have in the verse as well. And we have, which is kind of the core part of this whole drop, this sample that I made beforehand. That's just a lot of resonators and a lot of reprocessing. Here, this is the original sample. Took out all the low end and added some dimension expander and disperser and re-chopped it so the rhythm is different. Then we have some more color layers on top of that. For example, this one sound that I made in a sound design session, or these sounds, layered with a pad that's volume automated. Basically a pad, it's just a sound file that's playing the same chord for the most part, also volume automated, and a hand pan with a lot of reverb and OTT, mid-side OTT. It's also just volume automated. Then we also have some fills here. More fills. These are just sprinkled throughout the entire track.
Wow.
It's a lot of different things, different samples. We have my friend Sapphire going, wow.
Wow.
Just very fun. You have the Celeste playing here. It's a very tasteful background melody. We have some bells that are playing in the background. This is probably the only element that is not sidechained. And some background elements like this 8-bit type of sound. It's very sparkly. Some more weird textural sound design. And this background element with the same rhythm as the ride. It's just quarter note with a lot of the low end taking out. Gives the whole thing a bit more energy. Then we get to the second part of drop 1, which is where the chords change, sort of. Because the interesting part of this is I'm essentially just taking the same sample, but I'm pitching it up 3 semitones, and then again 2 semitones. But it's the same sample. But it kind of works because this, to me, feels like you're resolving a lot of tension, so you have the same type of feel from a 5-to-1. Just that it's all minor chords and it's the same sample. Of course, the sub is playing the same thing. Same with all the other elements. Also have some added sound design bits here. It's very sparkly, very high energy, high end. This is just a random Skybreak sample that I don't even know where it came from initially. It was probably some sort of pad that I chopped up to make it sound more interesting. OTT, disperser, dimension expander, your standard color-based stuff. Then we come to the transition into the build-up that eventually leads to drop B, where I'm taking out a lot of especially low end to kind of take it down the energy a bit to build it back up. This is also where I start to introduce the basic ideas that are going on in drop 2. So we got all these layers here that are very similar to what is being played in the actual drop. It's the same sounds, just less choppy, so it's not as abrupt, because we're going from a very sustained part to a very rhythmical part. We also have some chord layers on top of this. And most importantly, we have some transitional effects, like this riser that I made. Some more risers layered on top of that. And this very interesting sound design bit that I designed beforehand as well. It's just very warbly and weird, and I automated it so it's panning from left to right and left to right. Makes for a very interesting part to listen to. On top of that, of course, I have one of my friends saying, "Let us begin."
Let us begin.
I think it's a very fun sample, which leads us right into drop B, or the second part of the drop. It starts right with this very choppy bass line that is, again, the same sample that I used before. Just chopped up with the same sub and mid bass. I have a transient layer on top of that to make it hit a little bit harder, and a lot of layer elements above this. So I got the same hand pan, volume automated again. Some more weird sounds. These are essentially usually just pads or sound design bits that I chopped up to fit the rhythm. I actually have two pads just here, just a normal one and one that's layered an octave above. Both volume automated just to repeat the rhythm of the bass, so it goes like this. And this is applied to basically every layer here. Same with the bleepity bloops. It just comes down to a lot of layering. Also some chord layers. And I think this is probably one of the core parts of drop 2 is this lead here. Which, interestingly enough, is just a Reese that is pitched up with with honestly just very minimal processing. And we got a decent bit of distortion, some crystallizer and dimension expanding and EQ, but it's nothing crazy. I have that layered with another saw wave. Then we have the same background stuff that we had in drop 1. And the rest pretty much consists of random fills. So we have the same idea going throughout the entire drop. But for example here, we have some more crazy fills that just make the entire thing more interesting. In my opinion, it's pretty important to keep some level of consistency while at the same time making the entire thing sound interesting. Because if I just repeat the same 4 bars over and over and over again, you're just gonna get bored of it. But that's why we add stuff like this, which is just a lot of random stuff. So we have this Reese bass, for example, this chopped up bell sound that I made to sound very glitchy, and some random bass riser. Also a drum fill, you know, just little variations here. Then at the end of drop B, we have the same idea that's going on at the start of drop B. But then it slowly starts up building an energy again. Plays this one sustained chord and then fades out into reverb, which works great as a transition into an outro. And I also have some transition elements to layer that entire thing. I'll just fade it out slowly into the outro. So the outro is pretty straightforward. We have a lap soft piano. It's very reverbed. Kind of sounds like the Minecraft piano a little bit. I have a Celeste on top of that doubles the melody. A sound font and some choir pad that play this chord swell. Also very drenched in reverb. Underneath that I have an acoustic bass that's just plucking away a few notes. Same thing that the piano is playing essentially. And we have a little bass that doubles the swells. It's just a Reese bass. Also there is an atmospheric layer that is basically going out throughout the entire track. It's quietly in the background, just giving a bit more background atmosphere. And then towards the end of the outro, we fade out most of the elements except for the piano, the Celeste, and the atmospheric layers. And just continue the melody idea with a couple of variations here and there. We slowly build up. Last chord, a lot of tension, pause, and then back to the home chord. Just a very satisfying ending to the song, I think. And then I just let that ring out and reverb a little bit. And that is essentially the song. Also, one thing to note that I haven't mentioned yet is how I do my sidechaining, which is basically just an LFO tool that is triggered by the kick and the snare, or rather this MIDI clip that I have here. But you can also just do automation, volume automation for this, that works just fine. So yeah, that's essentially my track Neural, which is gonna be live on the 28th again. Let me know if you like this video, let me know if you want to know anything else, or if you want me to go into depth into any of these concepts that I made. I am definitely planning to make some videos on how I made the actual sound design behind this, so stay tuned for that if you're interested in that. So yeah, thank you. Peace out.